What's next for the Pacers in free agency? All the information is there. Summer League is done. The draft is done. All the big free agency moves are made. Could they do anything else? Are any players available actually interesting to them? And who are the best guys left regardless of the Pacers' interest and needs? We'll get to all of it today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name is Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today, back shifting toward free agency. The Summer League interlude was quite fun. I enjoyed the games. It gave the Pacers clarity on how they should manage the back of their roster, and we'll touch on that a bit today. But I want to get back to free agency for a second, and for maybe the last time until the Pacers actually do something, and just kind of take stock of who's available. Do the Pacers still need anything? What happens 3 weeks in for this team that has, as I talk, 15 players under contract and 2 two-way players under contract, which is very close to a full roster. My reminder every time I do this: in the offseason, you can have 21 players, 3 on two ways and 18 on standard deals. So the Pacers could still add players. And when they could do so is anyone's guess, right? If you want to use last year as precedent, and last year was unique for the Pacers in that they had more roster battles than normal. They usually carry the minimum players into camp and just try to focus on developing their own guys. They're clearly their player development program has worked instead of opting for roster competition. But last year they did opt for some roster competition, right? August 8th, the official date where Cole Swider got signed. Remember that? And he and Enrique Freeman got signed on the same day. Freeman got a two-way at that time. And then Swider and Kendall Brown came in to duke it out for a roster spot. And the answer ended up being neither of them, actually. But, you know, they have done – it's July 21st when I'm talking, 22nd when this will come out. Like, they could do that at any moment. Right, the 27th last year. Do I have this in my transaction log? Yes, July 27th was when we got the official release about Tristan Newton and Quentin Jackson getting two ways. You know, it just will happen when the time is right. But those dates are relevant because they're after Summer League, right? All the teams have the information now. All the games ended Sunday. I'm talking on Monday. Like, everyone's now competing on the same field for the same players. Like 5 minutes before I started recording, Chris Paul just signed with the Clippers, right? There's nothing else for teams to learn. Basically, the restricted free agents are the only thing holding up, air quotes, any sort of movement on the player front for any team. And that's why post-Summer League is why like the last flurry of fringy stuff tends to happen around the league, including for the Pacers. I might say Chris Paul's name on accident today because I was typing up a free agency list earlier, and then he signed right before. And yes, I'm recording in the morning because I'm about to go on a little trip with my family. I'll try to get the podcast done out there. Don't worry. But if this feels outdated because the Pacers do something later today, that's why I don't have any time to do anything else. Okay, that is a very long opening to say, let's talk about the Pacers. Things to keep an eye on for them specifically, non-external free agent addition, player with specific ties to them. Obviously, the big one is the two ways, right? This has been talked about a bunch with Summer League going on. So I apologize to repeat information for those of you who listen every single day, but how they sort out that last two-way spot is kind of the only ball juggling in the air that could have literal immediate consequence on their team this season. And they don't have to decide right this second, and that's settled. But, you know, they have two guys who have a clear path to it with Enrique Freeman and Talon Peter, who they drafted. I think most people after Summer League, given the age of the players and all that, and their experience levels, would probably tip towards Peter getting that. But Freeman is totally deserving, as the case I made yesterday, talking with Alex Golden, wrapping up Summer League, a totally deserving two-way player, whether it's with the Pacers or somewhere else. If they kept him, it would make good sense. And that's why the rest of the roster is kind of tied in with that, right? Would they rather have, if they keep Freeman, they have 5 centers. Do they need Tony Bradley at that point? Maybe not, but they don't have to cut Tony Bradley, right? They could just carry Tony Bradley into training camp and then figure it out in camp and move spots around then, right? So keep that in mind, is that what they decide to do with these guys is not a finalized decision. Training camp could be, you know, an influence on these decisions like it was last year with Swider and Brown, both getting cut. I also think there's a case for Quentin Jackson to get a standard deal. The trouble with all of this stuff is you can only sign 3 guys to 2As, and it's not like no agent or player who's 2A eligible is like psyched coming into camp on an Exhibit 10 deal just to compete for a 2A. They'd like to get it now. So having everybody in the right kind of seat on the bus or with the right contract right now is tricky, but they do still have to figure out how that will go. I think last year, a lot of people, right, last year at this time, it was a lot of discussion about none of the two-ways were signed. And it was Freeman and Jackson and Tristan Newton and Oscar Tshiebwe was a ball still in the air for the Pacers. And they did the Jackson, Newton, Freeman trio. And people thought, why didn't they keep Tshiebwe? And then look at that. It ended up, he played fine for the Jazz, don't get me wrong, but it ended up being fine, right? Like it's not that major of consequence, but you'd rather get the guy that you think has the best chance of developing. That's the point of a two-way. And that's what I think the Pacers need to think about. And they also need to figure out if they want their final standard spot to be Tony Bradley, to be a point guard, to be someone else, which is what we'll talk about in the second segment today, is if they actually did go do what they did with Cole Swider, get literally somebody else who is currently not on a team. What would that look like? What would they need? Why would they actually consider such a thing? So that's something to keep an eye on for the Pacers, is how do they sort out the end of the roster? Again, I always talk about their considerations, and people treat that as my opinion. My actual opinion is the Pacers would be convert Quentin Jackson's contract to a standard deal with maybe some light guarantees, maybe some decent-sized guarantees, whatever, and then give Enrique Freeman the final two-way. Let Camp be the decider. If Freeman doesn't look very good, you could move Jackson back, as much as that would suck. He'd have to get if you wanted to move Jackson back, his guarantee amount would have to be pretty small. But if Freeman looks good, you could waive Tony Bradley. If nobody looks good, you could waive somebody else. Like that's just how you could do it. But give yourself more time to get more information, right? That's literally the whole point of training camp, is to figure that out. That's what they did last year, and they cut guys. And in the past, that's how they've rewarded the right players. So I think that is ultimately how I would try to do it as the Pacers. But there's other ways to give those guys contracts to get them into camp. That's what I would think they'd like to do. But those players, when they get somewhere, they know they're going to get paid and know they're going to get chances too. So keep that in mind for everybody. Exhibit 10s are going to happen. I believe we know that RJ Felton is getting one. Samson Johnson is getting one. I think that Stephen Ashworth, I believe, is getting one. Those are the only three guys I remember being reported at the time of the draft that I was checking in with people on. Maybe there's more that I'm forgetting. Just a quick reminder, that's basically for the boom. They get a bonus, potentially. They don't have to get a bonus. If they sign with the Pacers, they basically get cut the next day. And then if they play with the G League team for a certain number of days, they get a bonus. So the reason they do it is because that bonus plus their G League salary is like a healthy basketball lifestyle and salary, and they get to develop with the team that they choose. I've heard good things about the boom pipeline from agents before. So they got three guys right away in right after the post-draft process. But just because a guy signs an Exhibit 10 does not mean he'll be in camp, does not mean he figures into the Pacers' plans. But like Jahlil Okafor signed one last year, just keep an eye on who could be a guy that, if he plays well with Noblesville, could be a call-up. But don't keep an eye on them and as he could compete. I want to see him play. Like, that's not really something that matters. Tony Bradley is a guy to keep an eye on. There's no new information to get. Do they want him as the fourth center? They should take him into camp. He's completely non-guaranteed. They can trade him as a non-guaranteed salary. That's exciting and great, and offer some flexibility if they want to guarantee a certain amount, like has happened with countless players who have earned more money. I do not think he'll start, even if he's on the Pacers this year. I do not think he'll start the season on his current contract. He's not worth more than the minimum, which is what he currently makes, although they could, in season, use his non-guaranteed salary in that same way. So it's possible that if he plays well enough in camp or they really want to keep him, they could just keep him on this deal and cut him later. It's only a small cap difference. It's not a big deal, but because his deal is completely non-guaranteed, and I think basically everybody would agree, given the Pacers' new goals and the age of their centers, he would be fourth of the four in the pecking order. Do they want to keep a fourth center who might not play very much in lieu of savings when they could open up some trade flexibility just by cutting him anyway? That's something for the Pacers to decide and for everybody to keep an eye on. But there's no point to just cutting him right now unless he knows he's getting guaranteed money somewhere else, and it's just basically like a favor, for lack of a better term. So I suspect Tony Bradley will make it to training camp, but we'll see there. The last two guys, the only two still floating out there, Pacers free agents from last year, James Johnson, Tony Bradley. Will they be in any capacity in the Pacers' plans? It seems very unlikely, given how the offseason has gone, especially for Bryant. They already have four centers. James Johnson, like if he wants a different kind of role or something, could make some sense, I suppose. He is certainly somebody they like having around. They're just out of roster spots, right? At some point, you get enough young guys in the door that you can't keep rostering the old vet, and you need someone else to be the old vet, and they don't have anybody they can obviously cut to bring him in. But, of their three departees from last year, as it stands, would be Turner, Johnson, and Bryant. And two of those and so far those spots have been filled with Cam Jones, Jay Huff, and James Wiseman. It's funny to call James Wiseman a new fill-in because he was on the team last year, but regardless, that is the current status of free agency. I guess if Thomas Bryant signs elsewhere, which is possible, like the backup center market is not particularly awesome right now, or James Johnson signs elsewhere, which I sort of doubt he would, but maybe he got his finals experience. Who knows what he is considering at age 38 with kids getting older into their life. We'll see where that goes, but that's everything to keep an eye on for the Pacers internally with stuff that they have full knowledge of with players who are on their team or are on their team or should be in the mix for their team. Let's look externally. Do they need anything else? Could they need anything else? What would they actually pursue, if anything, of the available players? We'll get to that coming up next here on Locked On Pacers. Before we talk about that, though, we need to talk about Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. Monarch Money can help you track your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. So many surprising things right on the app. How much you're spending on takeout or subscriptions. Will it surprise you? Will it be good for you? Will you be happy with that? If it adds up to more than you expected, you can make some changes. If everything is in one app, it's so easy to manage your money day to day. If you share your finances with somebody, right there, you can have those accounts on the same page. If you've been chasing financial goals, or you wished your accounts and spending habits were in one place, or you want to see how quickly certain things add up, Monarch Money is for you. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off of your first year. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Clippers. Chris Paul is back. What is this weird realm where I am like rooting for the Clippers? I want Chris Paul to win something. I thought he was the young, naive Tony thought Chris Paul was the best player in the NBA at a time in the late 2000s and early 2010s. I was not as into the NBA back then as I am now, but still rooting for him. Loved his career. He's a great player. If this is his last season, it's a fun team for it to be on. Love the Wiley vets fighting together. I hope that team does something, although I don't necessarily expect that they could dethrone OKC. I'll be rooting for it. Go Clippers. Okay, let's keep rolling here. External free agents to kind of poke around on and talk about this, right? And I think the discussion here really is, are there any external free agents for the Pacers that really do anything for them, right? What would the Pacers actually need? Because you could say, like Chris Paul just signed, he's good, right? He's a good player. Malcolm Brogdon's a free agent. He's a good player. There are players who are free agents right now, and we'll talk about this in the third segment, who are legitimately good rotation level players. Like if you sign someone of that quality, it makes sense why you do it. You're doing it because they're good and they're going to play. But the Pacers are in this kind of nebulously floaty, like, yeah, their players are good and they're probably good enough to win 40 to 38 to 45 games, but also like clearly their ceiling is capped and like a youth-filled season would be a good thing for them. Tying those together with free agency is kind of hard. And so external free agents have to fit very certain things for the Pacers. That's thing one to consider. Thing two to consider is, what would that player actually want, right? Why would maybe he would, but like I'm just using Brogdon as an example because I just said his name. Why would Malcolm Brogdon want to come to the Pacers? Right? He'd be their fourth guard, maybe, right? Like, what does that do for him? How does that prolong his career or his earnings, right? You could do that with any number of the players we'll talk about in the third segment. Like, there has to be a role for them to come to the Pacers that is like congruent with their actual talent level right now, so it makes sense for them to take it, and either a chance that they'll play well enough to get paid again, or a chance that they'll do enough with the Pacers that they'd want to stay with the Pacers. Often in this, especially as the cap is not going up as much next year as people thought, at least that's the current projection, like your own team is often your best chance to get paid. And so you want it to be a good, you want it to be a good fit so you can keep playing for that team. So that is something to keep in mind too, is like, it's going to be so easy for everybody listening to shout like, oh my gosh, go get, I love D'Anthony Melton. Or like, wait, what? Gary Payton is a great defender. Like, yeah, like why would those be a good fit for both parties? Besides they're a good player and the Pacers would want good players, there has to be a marriage that makes sense. So let me talk about some external free agents that I would think make sense for the Pacers because I think here are the questions the Pacers would ask in this discussion, right? I think Quentin Jackson's a good player. No doubt about it. I have made the case that he should have a standard deal, given that he played good enough on his two-way last year, has balled out in Summer League, and he's like towing the line of youth, although he turns 27 in September. Like that is probably turning the page from being a young player to like an actual established-ish, whatever you want to call that player. So that's question one to ask. Is there a free agent point guard who is just straight up better than Quentin Jackson that the Pacers would be like, yes, we would rather have that be a third point guard if they want a third point guard? We did get reporting from Jake Fisher that would be something that they potentially considered, and like logic dictates that. They have Nembhard, they have McConnell, and they have nobody else. And like they're one injury away from needing to rely on two-way guys a lot. Are they really ready to have Quentin Jackson and Ray J. Dennis be their third point guard all season? Like maybe. I think Quentin Jackson's good enough for it, but if they're limited to what they're on two ways or they need him in a pinch, it's just not easy to handle that. So somebody who could be a third point guard, like if that's what you naturally are right now in the NBA, you're a solid point guard, but no more than a backup or third guy, and you can get guaranteed money or a guaranteed opportunity, that might make sense. So that's one thing to ask do I think, or do you, listener, think that this player is certainly better than Quentin Jackson, right? That's one to ask. Are they better as a five than Tony Bradley, but also certainly not good enough to crack a rotation, right? That is also an upward interpretation kind of thing, but also that's a tricky one. Like how much guaranteed money are they really willing to offer for that kind of player, right? That's thing two. Question three is like, is this player young and interesting, right? Anyone, pick your age, what you consider a young NBA player, 27, 26, 25 and younger, who has some certainly upside, and either it would fit the positional needs that I just described, or just somebody they really like that just makes sense. Even if it's a wing who would get no minutes on the healthy Pacers. If you can get a young wing that you believe in and they believe in you as the Pacers, you got to consider that. So here's the list that I currently have of players that I would understand. I think one of them is older. Two of them are older, and the rest are more so like flyers, Tony likes kind of dudes. I've been mentioning this guy a few times throughout free agency. That's Monte Morris. Monte Morris is 30, so he certainly does not fit the young guy mold. He's played on a bunch of teams. But we're not far removed, and by not far removed, I mean 2 seasons removed from him with the Wizards being a 10-5 player who shot 48% from the field, 38% from deep at 1 turnover a game, and then had a really injured year with Detroit and Minnesota, and then signed with Phoenix to have a big role before they were able to also get Tyus Jones. So he kind of got screwed there. I still think Monte Morris can be good, and I love low turnover point guards. 4.2% turnover rate 2 seasons ago in his 33 games. He has not reached a 10% turnover rate since his rookie year. As a point guard, who has the ball like a good amount and is a decent kind of caretaker type, I think that kind of player, even in an environment of development, is helpful. Setting up other players, keeping the action moving. If he can pass and not turn it over and make enough shots, like that's a fine player to have on your team in kind of both contexts. Point guard is one of the only positions that I think even bad developing teams should be willing to have someone of some good quality at the position just to keep everybody else kind of moving. And the Pacers are certainly a good team. So Monte Morris is on my list. I like Monte Morris. Other point guards, actually most of this list is point guards that I like. Delano Banton, I've always had this huge basketball crush on because he's just huge for a point guard. And you know who else has a crush on Delano Banton? Every NBA team, because he keeps getting deals, even though he's kind of just like okay statistically. He shot 39% in 67 games last year. That's not very good. But he's 6'9" as a point guard. And he turns 26 in November. That's youngish. That height is certainly interesting. He averaged over 10 points a game for a full season 2 seasons ago, albeit with a crazy one game. I think that one game certainly what carried him over. He scored, what was it for Portland at one time? He had 31 for them at like the most random time. I would be interested in the Delano Banton experience as the Pacers, and he is certainly a guy who would be looking for any sort of contract or role at this time. Jared Butler is a very much Tony East fascination project. I watched him a lot with the Wizards, which is a real sentence I have to admit to you out loud. But last year, Jared Butler, at age 24, by the way, I think he was 23 when the season. Yeah, he turned 24 right before last season started. He played 60 games, and he averaged 9 points and almost 4 assists a game on 45% from the field and 36% from deep on like decent volume. Like that, he is a good player. He can't get a 2 anymore, but I think Jared Butler is good, and I would be willing to invest in him as a third point guard, basically as any team, just to try it. He averaged almost 12 points a game for Philly last year, albeit in only 28 appearances. I'm surprised that no one is willing to give a 25-year-old who's clearly of some level of talent any contract. And it is tough that he is not 2A eligible anymore, but I am a Jared Butler fan. He was quite good for the Wizards, and quite good in air quotes for per expectations. He was good for the Wizards, and I would be willing to bet that some team will be happy to sign him at some point this offseason. Campaign's just a decent player. He's not quite a caretaker, but he's good enough that, like, if he'd be willing to be your third point guard, you have to be like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. As the Pacers, he qualifies in the better than Quentin Jackson role, even though I don't know that I'd quite want to do that as the Pacers. Markelle Fultz is an interesting one. He was hurt going into last year, so he didn't sign for a long time with another team. Obviously, former number one pick, everybody's going to be like, ooh, interesting. And like at some point, that doesn't matter anymore. I think it's much earlier than other people. Like maybe only 3 or 4 years into your career do I no longer care about where you were drafted. But he is only 27. He just turned 27. Like he'll be 27 the entire next season. And it's like a fine player. He did not play well for the Kings last year, but again, was hurt for most of the year. The year before, he shot 47% from the field and was a decent passer, good rebounder for a guard. And the year before that, he averaged 14 points a game in 60 appearances for the Magic. I wouldn't call Markelle Fultz like a project anymore or like an awesome player, but if he's your third point guard on a guaranteed minimum contract, I think that would be fine. As the Pacers, he's had a goofy career. Then nobody could ever say that like they've never had a number one pick thing again. But honestly, he kind of fits both molds of like this player is good, this player is trustworthy, and also he's only 27. That's kind of youngish. The only center I really have two written down, is Christian Koloko, who I also have kind of liked, but he had, I think it was a heart condition. I hope I didn't get that wrong. Where that kept him out for a year, but when he got picked 31st, right? High second round, 33rd, excuse me. High second round in the Nembhard year. He wasn't 31st. That was Nembhard. And was always interesting to me, and then couldn't play for a whole year. But he's got defensive chops. He's decent on the glass. He shot 60% for the Lakers last year and was a decent enough player on both ends of the floor. And he's young still, right? I'd be interested in that as the Pacers. He is 25 as it stands. The other center that I personally really like is Charles Bassey. I think all the rumors are that he's Boston bound or that he maybe already signed there. If I'm wrong about that, I apologize. I've always been a Charles Bassey fan. He was with the Sixers for a while as a second rounder and then the Spurs for even longer. He's just a quality finisher, powerful dude. He shot 70% 2 seasons ago, albeit only in 19 games. I have interest in the power and rebounding of Charles Bassey if he would take a fourth center role with the Pacers. That's the list of guys that I, like you personally, you listening, might have your own opinions of players that you think, yeah, they should sign that guy. I think he's good. That's the list of guys that I think, yes, there is a clear path to you wanting to be on the Pacers. And I, as the Pacers, would think about it. There's obviously lots of other good players that we're about to talk about in a second that could make some sense, but that is mostly my list. And there's a lot of other young guys you could squint at. Let's talk about the best players available and dudes I just like that could fit the like guys I would just pursue because I like them list. And then we can get you out of here on Locked On Pacers. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day, your second listen. Who had your favorite offseason? Go check them out. I liked Houston's a lot. Who had your worst favorite offseason? I did not like the Kings very much, and they just lost in the Summer League title game. Tough. Make Locked On Kings your second listen. Matt George was cracking me up with his intro about not caring about Summer League. Nate Clifford was quite good until that last game. Okay, who are the best guys available? Who is the crew of guys good enough that if the Pacers sign them, even if it would make kind of no sense, it's just like, oh yeah, that's interesting. So first of all, there's two wings that I just really like that don't really make sense for the Pacers, but if they got them, I'd be like, yeah, okay. And that's Amir Coffey and Lamar Stevens. They're just out there hanging out in the ether. But are there any external free agents that are still certainly, no doubt, rotation quality? These are not trade targets. We're only doing external free agents today. Let me see if you catch the theme of this. Okay. Malcolm Brogdon is still a free agent. Good player, former Pacer, obviously. Would help many teams. I'm sure he is actually probably now the next in line to get signed after Chris Paul. He's probably the best point guard still in the market. He can kind of be a combo guard, decent player, good size. It's weird that, and not weird, like there's always a pattern with this, where no team that he's been on wants to retain him. What does that mean? But he's certainly talented enough that he will keep getting jobs. Al Horford and DeAnthony Melton are both good players. It seems like they are both Warriors bound once the Kuminga situation is settled. We talked about Horford on this podcast a few times in the what's going on with Miles? What should they do at center situation? But it seems very obvious that with how much of free agency has gone on elsewhere and settled, that he will be a Golden State Warrior. Melton was there last year. We'll see if he goes back. Yes, I did type Chris Paul down. That's no longer the case. He's going to the Clippers. Malik Beasley's a free agent. That's not going to happen until this probe into his life is settled. He's a good player. And then there's these these are like starter level guys. Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. This is the not a shame if they start category. Brogdon, Horford, Melton, Chris Paul, Malik Beasley, although it wouldn't happen now. That could be like a small-ish starting five. And then obviously the restricted free agency crew. The Pacers can't afford these guys no matter what. That's Josh Giddey, Jonathan Kuminga, Quentin Grimes, and Cam Thomas. They all deserve something above the mid-level. In some cases, maybe much above the mid-level. But for some reason, they have a bad fit with their current team, or what their outlook isn't quite as obvious. But they are definitely, I think all four of those guys, starter quality players, even if they might not start for their own teams. There's a lot of rotation level dudes that are still interesting to me as well. Chris Boucher, talked about him when the Pacers had different center priorities early in free agency when everybody was like, what's going on? Miles Turner's going where? What are we doing? He's always been interesting to me, but he's a little on the older side. Gary Payton II is a good player. He can really guard. He moves the ball well. Like, he'd be a Pacers-y fit, but he's a good player. There's not really a role for him on the Pacers. Trey Lyles, Indy native, just had his camp at Arsenal Tech, I believe, pretty recently. I'm surprised he's still a free agent. Like, Trey Lyles is good. Trey Lyles has in the past been a decent enough shooter and like a small ball five and can kind of move the ball. He's going to the glass. I'm surprised he's available. But Trey Lyles is available. Precious Achiuwa is still out there. Carlisle's favorite quote during the playoffs. I don't think he'll be going back to the Knicks. Russell Westbrook is still out there. He was better than I anticipated he would be for the Nuggets last year. Corey Joseph actually was a decent playoff contributor for the Magic. He's still out there. I wonder if he's got anything left. Alec Burks, who seems like his best games are against the Pacers every single season. He's still sitting out there. There's a ton of veteran types. The vet men group, your DeAndre Jordan, Taj Gibson, Tristan Thompson, James Johnson, Patty Mills, those kind of groups. I mean, I didn't even type their names. I just put vet men's available. And then Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is still available. I have no idea what his future holds. There's been some reporting of teams contacting Ben Simmons, or at least poking around on the Ben Simmons experience. He probably would like a guaranteed role or guaranteed money that the Pacers can't offer. Ben Simmons turned 29 yesterday, which is my segue to say, what stands out to you about every name I just said in the not a shame if they start category or rotation level dudes? If you didn't know, the answer is that they're all 30 or older, every single one, except for Ben Simmons, who's 29 by 1 day, and Trey Lyles, who turns 30 in November. So he'll play 5 to 7 games this season as a 20-something-year-old. Every single other good available free agent, like this guy would actually play for basically every team in the league or almost every team in the league, is old. And that's why they're tough, even beyond that the Pacers roster is settled with good players already. That's why they're not Pacers fits. They're old and there's no obvious role, even if they're good, right? And so that's why I wanted to run through the list, is to just make the point clear. Beyond those guys, the free agency list is not inspiring, right? It's that far into free agency. We're you'll dispute this. So many people listening will be like, why didn't you say, I don't know, name your player, Seth Curry. Why didn't you say Seth Curry? Well, he's 34. I think he turns 35 next season. Why didn't you say whatever? And there's a chance I missed somebody, but I used my own opinion a little bit to get the quality of these guys down on a list. But all the good players left are old, right? Achiuwa's young. I forgot. I'm so sorry. Precious Achiuwa is 26. Everyone else is old. So that's the point of free agency that this is at, is that the Pacers are in a spot where they have very specific niche needs in a way that the best players probably aren't even worth considering for them, which is why I wanted to do this segment, to say the next steps of Pacers free agency are probably, I did mention guys in the second segment for a reason. It's not over. Cole Swider did happen last year. But of actual interesting names to fans, do not expect them to come the Pacers' way unless it's a trade. If anything happens with the Pacers now, I would anticipate it's somebody that is either younger or of no longer major name ilk in the NBA, but they're looking for either a chance at a role or a chance at some guaranteed money. That is the status of Pacers free agency, which we will now not talk about until they make a move. If they sign somebody, we'll talk about it and what it means. If they trade somebody, we'll talk about it and what it means. We'll do the moves they can still make non-free agency edition, kind of non-free agency edition on August 1st, as is tradition. But outside of that, that's where the Pacers are. That's what they could do. And that is the available crop of players. So then thank you all so much for listening today. Hope you all enjoyed as we officially transition to the offseason, not talking about games category of Locked On Pacers. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. East. This podcast is at Locked On Pacers on Twitter and on Instagram. Thank you all so much for listening today. Back tomorrow talking more Pacers and the offseason. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.